So one of the stories that's really been sending shockwaves throughout Europe, although many people had seen it coming for a while, is the collapse of the German government. Richard, obviously this is something you've been following really closely. What was the initial cause of the collapse, and then what was really underlying it in a longer term way?
So the whole initial problem was in autumn 23, when the Constitutional Court blew a gaping hole into the budget of the German federal government, and this blatantly exposed divergent economic policies of the three parties in the government. The Social Democrats were elected because they promised to increase pensions, to increase welfare payments. The Greens were successful because they promised a lot of money for the ecological transition of the economy, and the Liberals were very popular because they promised to not increase taxes. And these three goals actually were completely contradictory, and since this Constitutional Court verdict, there was no going back for this coalition. They just simply run out of money. And now this whole House of Cards collapsed, and I was just wondering why it took almost 1 year. Certainly because the German political system is set up in a way that this encourages snap elections.
And in a way, do we have to go back to the weirdness of the coalition as such, which as you've indicated, three parties maybe disagreeing on lots of things, but the only thing that united them really was the desire to keep out the undesirable parties and to form a kind of grand coalition that formed its own cordon sanitaire against especially the AfD.
This coalition was voted in office in 2021, and it's a testament to how much the world has changed since then. These parties were successful because of completely different reasons that today don't matter anymore. They were successful because of the green wave in the end of the 2010s. Then COVID played a role, and also how weak the CDU as an opposition force was after 16 years of Merkel. But this underlying causes for the electoral success back then are all gone by now, and for the for this new world, they didn't have any answers. They didn't have an answer for the cost of living crisis. They didn't have an answer to the how to handle migration, and also this whole economic stagnation that is in Germany since 2022 in a constant stagnation, and 2025 is not going to be any better. They didn't have any answer for that. So obviously there is time for new elections.
Yeah, and Peter, Rich has indicated that the collapse of the support for Greens in response to the disasters of green policies in Germany surely plays a strong role in the collapse of the government more broadly.
Absolutely, yes. So apart from the chaotic immigration that the German government is failing to handle, also because they refuse the Australian approach at the EU level, there's the terrible state of the German economy. And this is linked to the large-scale energy experiments that Germany has been engaging in. It's not a good idea to mess around with your energy supply, and yet that is what Germany did. It is phasing out fossil fuels. This made them more dependent on Russia than otherwise. When Russia pulled the gas, Germany became very dependent on imports of expensive American LNG gas. Now it's very good that they still have gas at all, but of course it's not good that it's so expensive. The natural gas price in Europe in 2025 is expected to be 5 times the level as compared to America. So you don't have to be a genius to understand that this is a big problem for energy intensive industries in Europe, and Germany is the motor of the European economy. The chemical industry is badly suffering. BASF, a big German concern, they are divesting from Germany. They are investing in China, and it's all happening. If you look at the ETS, which is the European Union's climate tax, this in itself is higher than the total natural gas price in the United States. So this problem is entirely homemade. On top of that, we had this coalition, which is just, I think, beyond embarrassing. In the middle of a deep energy crisis in 2022, they decided to continue with shutting down perfectly functional nuclear power plants. You cannot make it up. The so-called liberal party, FDP, I'm sure they could have stopped it. They could have said, look, this is just an absolute emergency. At least we have to freeze this process. They did not. And now Christian Lindner, the inadequate leader of the FDP, he basically torpedoed the coalition, hoping that voters will forget. But I'm pretty sure they won't.
This whole issue of running out of money is linked to the constitutional debt break in the German constitution. And this leads again to European fiscal and monetary policies, because Germany is the core member of the Eurozone, and the Eurozone is set up in a way that encourages more and more debt in the member states, because there is through the European Central Bank there are mechanisms that are basically sharing the debt between the Eurozone members, and the debt that Germany doesn't take then can be taken up by France, by Italy, by Spain as far. So actually the forces on the political left who want to get rid of this constitutional debt break has a very fair point. You are the stupid one to be fiscally responsible in this setup. And there are now many economists on the political right who say, okay, the best solution would be to have a responsible fiscal policy all in the entire Eurozone, but since we cannot have them, we get rid of the debt break and just take on more debt and invest more into infrastructure and this kind of stuff, because the worst option is to be alone fiscally responsible in this Eurozone setup.
Well, looking ahead, I mean, what can we expect in the run-up to new elections, which are scheduled, I think, for February time? But what can we expect? Does anybody have an answer to these big both geopolitical, economic, political crises that are facing Germany? We saw throughout the year of elections where the AfD were gaining ground and also other parties. But does anyone really have an answer to the problems facing Germany, and what might we expect in the elections?
I think the perspective is better for the economy, because there are economic sound voices regarding economic policies. Regarding, for example, foreign policies or how to continue with the EU, the issue is much more complicated. One of the biggest and one of the most interesting aspects about the government coalition crisis was that it dragged on since 2022 almost, and the main political force that benefited from this was first the AfD, then the CDU and the CSU noted, okay, we need to do something. Then they became much more pronounced in the solutions. Then they gained also ground, and now the biggest question is who is. So we have now two forces who said that they are not going to do coalition with each other. Certainly the CDU excluded it, and. Regarding certain economic policies or migration issues, they can get along, but for example, on topics like Ukraine, they cannot. So we will have most likely we will have a majority in the new parliament that on certain matters could agree, but on others cannot, and it's going to be very challenging to form a new coalition out of this. Most likely the CDU is going to turn to the remnants of the Social Democrats or the Greens and somehow form a center-left coalition, but I don't think that, but their big problem will be that the AfD will be their most likely a second biggest force who can always outflank them from the right. It's going to be there is going to be a lot of political instability in the future.
Well, it depends a bit indeed if CDU and SPD have a majority. According to some opinion polls, it looks like, especially if the far left and the liberals would be under the electoral threshold of 5%. You would expect that then the biggest force, the CDU, will then reap some extra seats because of that, and narrowly have a majority. So then you would have such a coalition, of course, without Olaf Scholz. He will have to find a different job, which is
I'm sure he'll end up in Brussels.
Well deserved, probably. But yeah, in terms of policies, the CDU has sensible center-right policies. It's good that the CDU finally has a center-right leader again. You know, we had Merkel for a long time, who is, I mean, center-left, and that's putting it politely. And then we had some intermediate leaders who were very weak. So I think Merz in itself is a decent center-right leader with a proper vision for Germany. The question is, will he be able to implement his program? And I think what Germany needs, whether he's going to implement that or not, is to completely abandon all this green orthodoxy. And you know, maybe thanks to President Trump, we may actually be nearer to that than we think, because Trump is going to double down on fracking, on fossil fuels. The Federation of European Businesses, Business Europe, has said that European industry is becoming even more problematic when it comes to their competitiveness as a result of the fact that you have now Trump that is going, full steam ahead. But then, in Germany, especially among the media, the commentariat, green orthodoxy is some kind of religion. Mm-hmm. So will Merz dare to stand against that? We'll have to see it. Yeah.